Amy Suzara, Panay Poet, here on Setting the Standard on KPFA 94.1 FM. And in the studio with me tonight, I have the great honor and pleasure to have a best-selling, award-winning author, critic, journalist, activist. He's written children's books, and we just actually came from an amazing reading with Avacha, Music of the Word, as well as he gave a keynote speech recently for Taste Harmony last night in Richmond. And who I have in the studio tonight is Luis Rodriguez. It's very nice to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, the theme for this segment is around getting our work out there as authors of color. And, from becoming familiar with your work, I'm seeing you just do this in about every way you can. I can especially seeing you read tonight that, you have such passion of completing that circuit, like the ways that you were inspired and making sure that you continue that, inspiring others from schools to prisons to stages to events. And, I want to say it's very inspiring to see how you've gotten all these publications. And not only that, Luis has, just to integrate some of the biographical information in addition to writing memoirs, the most famous one being Always Running, La Vida Loca, Gang Days in LA, as well as a more recent one, It Calls You Back, an Odyssey Through Love, Addiction, Revolutions, and Healing. Luis, you've also created 15 books in poetry, children's literature, fiction, nonfiction. So, what better person to have to speak about getting our work out there and possibly shedding some light for those of us who are, working on that very effort. I just want to start first with what the work that you have been doing this weekend and just what brought you down up to the Bay Area. And you did a keynote speech, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, because that sounded like a really inspiring event.
Well, that's really the reason I came up. Taste Harmony was written by the young people of Richmond, talking about the violence of Richmond. They used the setting of the violence to tell the Romeo and Juliet story. So to me, it was amazing. It was so powerful. It had everything you can imagine, poetry. It had funny parts. It had sad parts. There was violence, but there was redemption and change. And so that's why I came. But, once I'm here, I went to Soledad Prison. I'm going to San Quentin Prison. I'm going to San Bruno County Jail, the Alameda County Juvenile Hall. I've got 2 other schools I'm going to. So we just piggyback a lot of other events along with that.
Now, did you have all of these set up as sort of a tour, or was it sort of things that started to emerge spontaneously because of the networks you have?
Yeah, they kind of pretty much emerged that way. I'm on like a constant tour. I'm always traveling. More than a third of the year I'm gone, just speaking wherever I can. So, that's how that worked out.
Yeah. That's really wonderful to reach so many people in one short trip. Yeah. I'm going to sort of pull from this beautiful collection called My Nature is Hunger, New and Selected Poems, 1989 to 2004. And there's a line that really struck me. It begins and ends with, "Every road should come to this end, a place called home." And it's sort of relevant to what you're saying about being on the road. And I want to speak to, just because we're talking about writers of color and people of immigrant backgrounds that are on our show this evening, experiencing displacement, feeling that there isn't a home in various ways, but yet this topic being so universal and accessing people in a different way. In this poem, you describe the absence of home, the lack of a roof, and the murders that go unanswered. I'm curious because home is a concept I write a lot about, and I feel like I'm constantly circling around it and searching for it in my own writing. What does the concept of home mean for you in this poem and also in general in your writing?
Well, I think you hit on something important. We're exiled. We feel exiled. We feel like we're refugees from so many things, whether it's war, poverty, repression, and then you feel like you're lost. But I began to realize that you gotta just not think about borders anymore. You think that the whole earth is our home. I had a once Samoan elder tell me that, I told him my mother had died, and he goes, "Well, you always have a mother, Mother Earth." And he was right. He's like, so yeah, your mother was your earthly mother, but Mother Earth holds all of us. It was very beautiful. So I began to realize that, in fact, us exiled people, we're always at home. And even those those who are at a home probably have the whole world as their home. So that's kind of how way you got to transpose it, make it like I'm at home no matter where I'm at.
I think just it's bringing up the fact that you also do some work around spiritual practices and kind of the native traditions, and your biography talks about tracing your native roots as well. I would be curious about if you could speak to that a little bit.
Well, a lot of Mexicans don't know the native roots, and if they are native, they did studies and found that our gene pools were 70 to 80% Amerindian. Then, of course, there's Spanish and some African. My mother, though, happens to be Rarámuri, which is a tribe in Chihuahua, southern Chihuahua. It's the second largest cohesive tribe north of Mexico City after the Navajo. And I went down there to see this tribe. My mother told me stories about them, and I had to go visit them. They have a very beautiful concept that I share, and I shared with the guys at Soledad Prison. It's dance or die. And what it is they have to do rituals. They have to, because they really think that without them, the world will die. They keep the world going because they feel that the world has lost its ceremony, its rituals, its connection to the sacred. So it's a beautiful concept that it's like, it really drew me to them. So this is part of my roots, and I think it's important for everybody to find what those are, because we all have indigenous roots. Even Europeans do. They forget that they were Gaelic and they had Germanic tribal roots, and some of those people were completely repressed by the big churches, So it's like getting back to it, you get back to something deeper, and so that's what I was trying to get back to, the deeper roots that I have.
Mm-hmm. How is that connectedness for your roots and kind of knowledge and around indigenous background and history come up in you or inspire you in your writing?
Well, I think because being rootless, feeling of exile, that me looking for who I was helped me in many ways what I do now. And I think I had to say that Chicano movement of the 60s and 70s was probably the single most impetus, because they really emphasized that. We're indigenous. We already belonged here. They kept treating us as immigrants, as foreigners, as strangers, when in fact we were back in our own land. And I don't mean just back in our own land because Mexico used to control this. I mean back to our land because we're indigenous. And we had tribal connections. The Rarámuri, for example, are linguistically tied to the Hopi, Arapaho, to the Shoshone, so we have tribal connections even with North American tribes.
Wow, so much that it makes me want to research and learn some more as well about this continent. I want to turn to, and I think this is a different kind of roots. I was reading the poem Tia Chucha, and I'm sure you've spoken quite a bit about this poem because you've named your press and the Centro Cultural in Southern California. But just for the listening audience, in which you just describe this woman seen by some as crazy as the wisp of the wind's freedom, and someone who is always quick with a story. And as I mentioned, you named the Press and Literary Center in the San Fernando Valley after this character or this person. Who is Tia Chucha, and what is her significance?
Well, she was the artist, poet in my family, and everybody said she was crazy, but she wasn't. She was just a creative spirit. And of course, sometimes in families, you tend to be self-contained. You don't want to be out there. You don't want to really express yourself. My family was a very silent family. It's kind of like the old, I'm not sure entirely if it's Mexican indigenous, but it's like you don't tell nobody nothing. You don't tell your story. You don't put your laundry up there. My aunt was doing poetry, singing songs, playing guitar, creating all these things, and I just loved that spirit, and it really fueled up my own creativity. And I wanted to honor that. To me, the press and the center named after her was to honor that spirit in everyone, and not say it's crazy, but actually say this is the way we should be.
I love that character too, because sometimes I think as writers we are a little bit seen as being on the edge or outside the norms. And I think just to describe too to the audience that this Centro Cultural, which I have yet the privilege to visit, and bookstore, is a place where art and mind meet for a change. And I see that you have some great activities there, from readings to workshops and cultural events. Could you tell us, just because many of us up here in the Bay Area haven't got to visit, what is the goals of this bookstore and center?
Really, I got to say it's just the arts. Everything is arts. We have music, theater, dance, writing, puppetry, photography. We teach kids from really small to elderly. We have 18,000 people that we serve a year. In this community, which, by the way, is the second largest Mexican Central American community in the whole country after East LA, 500,000 people. There's not one bookstore, not one culture center, not one art gallery. we opened it all up. And the story is that in 12 years that we've been there, other arts stuff has happened. We actually have, there's always the arts was there, it just didn't have a place to be expressed. So that's what we created with the Echuchas.
That's so wonderful. So you were meeting a need, and so just back to the idea of, I think Toni Morrison said, if there was a book you want to read, then you should write it. It's sort of like, if you want to have the work out there, start a center, start a press if you can, and help others also get the work out there, because it may not come out of somewhere else, right? So
Right.
do what
You got to do it. And I think you have to make your way,
Mhm.
you know, especially when you have all these blocks, when there
Mhm.
are obstacles, when people say you ain't good enough and that you ain't supposed to do this, then you got to forge it through. And I think that's the story of all of us, our history, and coming to another country and getting blocked, knocked down. And unfortunately, most people give up, but there's still people that say, I got to keep making it. So me and my wife, by the way, we created the space. We made our way. She runs it. It's really her space, in my view, because she brings in the feminine, the beauty, the indigenous that she brings to it. The other beautiful thing about it is that even though we're Mexican, Central American based there, the Echucha Press publishes everybody. It's Chicano, Puerto Rican, it's Asian, it's African American, it's even Irish American. You know, we publish the best work that comes to me, and we don't say, well, this person is white, I don't want to publish him. No, we publish whatever beautiful work comes in. So I think that's the other beauty about it. We didn't want to just say it's just for Chicanos, but for anybody that can do amazing work.
Yeah, this is perfect because we could probably speak all evening about always running and the challenges and the fortunes that you had, because I was teaching at City College, and one of the teachers, I was new there, and he was like, you got to teach this book, and it maybe like gave me a copy. He said the students love it and they keep asking for it. And then I was reading up on how it was one of the most stolen books from the library, and the book is in the description that you can pull up online, but it's a memoir about a young Chicano gang member surviving the dangerous streets of Los Angeles, and it's been called one of the most significant coming-of-age stories of our time. Maybe to tailor it to our theme, could you talk a little bit about like the challenges of maybe getting the work out or getting the work picked up, or sort of what some tidbits there, what happened?
Well, I have to start by saying that when I was homeless in the streets of LA, I was 15 on heroin. I was kicked out of the house. I was living in the streets, and my refuge was libraries, and books really saved my life. And I remember there was a little image I had where I was looking at all these books, and for a short little moment, I thought, what if my name was on one of those spines? And then I just slipped away. And I didn't realize it was calling me, and it was giving me this image, then I lost it. And years later, that's what happened. I would have books with my name. And, Luis Rodriguez is really my Concord name. It's not, I wish I had my indigenous name. I don't know what it is. But still, it's a name that's not in the book. So my thing was, you know what? This is what we have to do. We have to make it happen. And the Echucha Press became a press for all those voices, socially engaged, conscious voices that couldn't be heard. And I wanted to have, not just for me, but to give others that opportunity. We've done it for almost 25 years. We got 50 to 60 books. Some of them have been well known, like Elizabeth Alexander became Obama's inaugural poet the first time around. We have Patricia Smith, who's like the poetry slam champion of all time. We've had some amazing writers come through our press.
Yeah. And so you're have a little bit about that book and what are you doing with this book lately? And
well, I wanted to address 40 years of leaving the gang life and how the madness still calls you back, because that's the hard struggle. When I go to these prisons, I see these guys and they want to change and they think, well, I'll be okay. And I say, well, you will be okay. You will overcome, but you got to remember, it will call you back in many ways. The two major ways that it came in my life was the rage, because I didn't know I had PTSD. I just didn't know. I didn't know the diagnosis. And then addictions, which was related to it. And even though I let go of heroin and the gang life and I wasn't going to be shooting nobody anymore, I ended up raging, hurting relationships, hurting my kids. I ended up with addictions, drinking, and abandoning my son. In so many ways, it's a story about me and my oldest son, how he ended up in the gang, how he ended up in all this trouble, and I really couldn't save him. And that's part of it. It's like, it'll call you back, and it called my son into that life. I escaped a lot of things that a lot of people couldn't have, but it still called me back by taking my son. So I think that's part of the story. He ended up doing a total of 15 years in prison. He's actually now out and doing very well. And that it ends with that, where he leaves prison And we don't know what's going to happen to him, but in a year, well, I think he's been out for about 2.5 years now. He's been doing really well. So,
Wow.
yeah. Though at the very end of the book, we weren't sure, but here he is out of prison. What are we going to do for him?
Wow, wow. So, I mean, it's just so inspiring that you've chronicled, your own story, and now talking about your son, and being able to bring this to different audiences, both who might relate to the story and maybe people who are, general audiences who have also picked up because of the quality and the power of the story itself. I was wondering if you would be able and interested in sharing, I know you just did a reading, so you might be tired, but if you're open to reading a poem for us just to kind of hear some of the words tonight.
And I'm wondering if maybe I should just read the Tia Chucha poem.
Oh, that would be perfect.
Yeah, because that way people can get a better sense of why she's so important.
Yes.
I can read it. So the poem goes like this. Every few years, Tia Chucha would visit the family in a tornado of song and open us up as if we were an overripe avocado. She was a dumpy, black-haired creature of a people who often came unannounced with a bag of presents, including homemade perfumes and colognes that smelled something like rotting fish on a hot day in the tuna cannery. They said she was crazy. Or sure, she once ran out naked to catch the postman with a letter that didn't belong to us. I mean, she had this annoying habit of boarding city buses and singing at the top of her voice. One bus driver even refused to go on until she got off. But crazy? To me, she was the wisp of the wind's freedom. A music maker who once tried to teach me guitar, but ended up singing and singing, me listening and her singing until I put the instrument down and watched the clock click the lesson time away. I didn't learn guitar, but I learned something about her craving for the new, the unbroken, so she could break it. Periodically, she banished herself from the family and was the better for it. I secretly admired Tia Chucha. She was always quick with a story, another Pepito joke, or a handwritten lyric that she would produce regardless of the occasion. She was a despot of desire, uncontainable as a splash of water on a varnished table. I wanted to remove the layers of unnatural seeing, the way Tia Chucha beheld the world with first eyes, like an infant who can discern the elixir within milk. I wanted to be one of the prizes she stuffed into her rumpled bag.
I love that poem. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that brings it full circle around sort of the inspiration, and I think I wanted to give you a chance to also see if there's anything you wanted to touch on, first of all. But I do want to kind of have a question for you to sort of inspire our audiences to close. But is there anything you want to share?
Well, just to say, for any poet and writer out there, it is a hard time and things are changing, the technology is changing, but in many ways it's also liberating. Now people, I think, can produce their own work. And the only thing that I would say is make sure it is your best work, because that still shouldn't change. People should still put some rigor behind their work, knowledge, read tons of poetry, read tons of books, know what you're doing, and then add your imprint into it.
Yes, and you actually just exactly read my mind, which was, were there words that you would want to say to writers, aspiring writers, and I think you just did that. And are there any events or upcoming things around any of your books, or even in Southern California, because I know that people can listen to this online, that you want to tell us about?
Well, if they ever come to Southern California, especially the end of this month, I think February 23rd, we're going to have our 12th anniversary of Tia Chucha's Cultural Center and Bookstore. Please come by. Everybody that's in the San Fernando Valley, come to the northeast of San Fernando Valley, we'll be there. And of course, even if it's not an anniversary, come by and visit us. We have a great bookstore, and we have Tia Chucha Press books there, and we have great events all year round.
So thank you so much, and our website is luisrodriguez.com.
LuisJRodriguez.com.
LuisJRodriguez.com, and everyone please check out It Calls You Back, which is a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award for autobiography. Wonderful work, much work you can check out on his website. Thank you so much, Luis, for being in the studio.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Good night. So this has been Amy Suzara, Panay Poet on Setting the Standard, 94.1 KPFA, and we're back to Pedro with some music. This is Amy Suzara, and I'm sharing 2 poems that are a part of my forthcoming chapbook, Finding the Bones, through Finishing Line Press. Tiny fires. Listen. We, Butiki, slid bulbous bellies over smooth rocks. We, gentle Butanding, turned the sea into milk. Now Nestle carton bobs on the fetid waters of the Pasig. Open sewers gape like torn bellies. Children hunt for metal parts in plastic sacks. Pandakan birthed poets, but now it sits in the shadow of a fuel tank, ripe for disaster. Unassailable evidence. Obtuse CEOs gaze down metallic towers, cursing shanty dwellers, clicking mahjong, kicking sipa, butchering pigs in the hell below. We, blood-stained tutubi, wings 30 feet spanned, could be seen drifting between storms and songs. We, 30,000 eyes, began with gills in shallow edges of the river, could breathe underwater. I tell you this because the thing is happening and you may look upon your cracked sheaths and see a thing that we were not. You may call yourself John, Susan, Kate, wear Old Navy, smile when someone thinks you look like Brad, Jennifer, Angelina. You may tip cowboy hats, sling guns on hips, shift the gears of German sports cars, but one day the game is up. The ones who gave you compliments regard your eyes, detect your blood-stained wings pressing through your skin. This is why it is important that you listen and remember we were not jars of talcum powder, not master creams and syringe serums cramming drugstore aisles, not teenage strippers in red light districts with faraway looks waiting for the Kano to take us home, not the Aita woman begging at the edge of the landfill where tiny methane fires light up the mountains of what the world has tossed away. And this is a poem called Liwanag, Light. And this is also from the same collection. I am 5, wandering the department store. The trundled hanging clothes, wire hangers, the colors, so alluring, and now these are not my mother's legs. When you are lost, you forget where you came from. In a dream, I look and look to find my mother. Here are women with her shape, her hair, but when they turn, they are not my mother. You could never really be found. It has been a very long time and things have changed. My mother did not see her mother's face crease with time. 20 years pass, voices cast on telephone line, umbilical cords stretched across the Pacific. Later she says, "Is this my street?" Now there are paved roads, gutters, smog. We used to ride the Kalesa on Sundays. The place you were lost from is just as new, as terrifying as the place you were going. Nasaan ba ako? Over the baletes, whitened bones pushing up through dirt like the folded knee of an ancestor, you stumble, catching mud between your toes. The butikis scutter over and under the arrangement of roots, the lamok drunk on your foreign blood, sweeter and thicker than the rest. You must go backward and forward simultaneously, a grass snake slithering this way and that. Split at the center, you grow 2 heads, 2 tongues. Remaining joined at the tail, you lengthen like a spool of light.